say Blackthorn Hollow Trailhead hides a doorway in the forest where the ground itself whispers for you to step inside. You're listening to ASMR 400 for Found. Don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe. I never thought I would find myself pulling into the gravel lot at Ashwood Hollow Trailhead, deep inside the Wachita National Forest in Arkansas. The place looked like any other forgotten hiking spot you would find tucked back along winding rural roads where the map lines thin out and the cell service drops off. But there was something about this trailhead that gave me a heaviness in my chest, kind of weight that makes you second guess even simple steps like shutting off the ignition or opening the car door. And I swear to you, the moment I turn off my headlights, the forest swallowed me whole in a blanket of shadow so thick I could not tell where the trees ended and the night began. Trail signs stood crooked like it had been shoved into the earth decades ago and never touched since its paint flaking its letters, almost illegible except for the word Ashwood that looked carved in deeper than everything else, like someone or something wanted to make sure that name never faded. I could hear the faint chirps of crickets, but underneath that came another rhythm, softer, slower, almost like breathing. But it was not my breath, and it was not coming from me. I froze by the hood of my car, listening and waiting, telling myself it was just the forest settling or an animal shifting in the undergrowth. But deep down I knew it was neither. He pulled my backpack onto my shoulders, adjusting the straps, trying to ground myself with a simple familiar motion. Just another night, just trees, dirt, and a trail, nothing special. But even as I told myself that, I could feel the sweat beat up at the back of my neck like the air itself carried a fever. The trail stretched out like a pale scar into the blackness, lined with tall pines whose trunks leaned in close, almost conspiratorial, like they wanted to keep their secrets from me and from the world. The first step onto the trail was like stepping into another reality. The gravel under my boots crunched far louder than it should have, and the sound seemed to echo back from the woods in a delay, as though the forest was repeating my movements, mocking me with a hollow rhythm. I walked slower than usual, letting my hands brush against my flashlight, but not yet turning it on, because I wanted to test the dark to see how long I could last without creating a bubble of light around me. The longer I walked, the more I felt like someone was right behind me, their footsteps falling in sync with mine. Every pause mirrored, every shift answered. I finally spun around quick, trying to catch someone in the act, but the trail was empty, just shadows that pulsed and bent, as though they were hiding something right out of sight. He shook it off, muttering under my breath, "Come on, man, get it together. Just your imagination, just nerves. It's just Arkansas woods, nothing out here but raccoons and coyotes." But saying it out loud did not make me believe it anymore. It only made me feel smaller, like the trees were laughing at my excuses, and the wind seemed to push my words back into my mouth, smothering them before they could spread. As I moved deeper, the air grew heavier, damp, like walking into a basement where the walls leak and mold clings to everything. Each breath felt thick, almost like swallowing water instead of air. My boots started to sink slightly into the ground, though I swore the path had been dry when I started, and when I shined my light down just for a second, I saw the dirt glistening like it was sweating, like the ground itself was alive. further I went, the clearer it became that Ashwood Hollow was not an ordinary trailhead. The map board at the parking lot had shown a 3-mile loop, but the path seemed to stretch endlessly ahead, twisting sharper than it should and doubling back on itself. I never once saw a marker or a split. It was like the trail was folding me deeper into its core. No matter how carefully I tried to track my direction, I felt like I was being led not by choice but by something unseen. Then came the smell, faint at first, like smoke drifting in from miles away, then stronger until it filled every breath. With the acrid sting of burned wood and flesh, I pulled my shirt over my nose, trying to block it, but it clung stubbornly, thick as tar. The forest was silent now. Crickets, no rustling, no wind, just that smell and the faint sound of what I swore were voices whispering just out of range. They tried to call out, "Hey, anybody out there?" but my voice cracked dry as though the air stole the sound before it could carry. I turned my light toward the trees, and for a moment I swore I saw shapes, human shapes, pale and still standing between the trunks, watching me, their eyes catching the beam in tiny reflections. But when I blinked, they were gone and only the bark remained. I forced myself forward, one step at a time, each movement deliberate, each breath shallow. I wanted to turn back, but the trail behind me looked darker than the one ahead, like the forest had closed its jaws around the way I had come. The only option left was deeper into the hollow, and I swear as I walked, I heard that breathing again, slower now, heavier this time, not from the woods, but from within. The ground itself beneath my boots, like something enormous, was asleep just under the surface, and my every step threatened to wake it. The air pressed down on me like a thick quilt drenched in sweat. I could feel my shirt sticking to my skin as though the forest itself wanted to absorb me. Further I went, the less I trusted my own senses. The trees stretched taller there, limbs weaving overhead like ribs in a cage, and the sky above was gone, hidden, swallowed in blackness that felt endless. I clicked my flashlight on at last, and the beam cut through the dark in a narrow line, but instead of comforting me, it only made me realize how small that circle of light truly was, a fragile bubble in an ocean of shadows. The trail sloped downward in a way I did not expect. The map had promised a gentle loop, but this descent felt unnatural, almost like a tunnel carved into the earth, except it was still open air, still trees, still dirt, yet each step carried me further down and further, and I glanced back once more, and the slope behind me looked steeper than before, like I had been sliding, not walking, like the ground had been pulling me without asking. And though I wanted to turn and climb out, I knew in my gut it would not let. Meth whispers grew clearer now, carried on no wind at all, voices that sounded like a crowd in a church basement murmuring prayers too low to understand, yet charged with weight. I held still, aiming my light from side to side, my heart hammering so hard it shook my vision, and I muttered low, "Stop messing with me, stop it. I do not scare easy." But the forest did not answer, not in words. At least instead, the dirt at the edge of the path stirred, like something shifting beneath the surface. I crouched low, my light catching the movement. I swear on everything holy I saw fingers pushing up from the soil, pale, bony, twitching before, pulling back down as though the ground had mouths that swallowed whatever tried to crawl free. I staggered back, whispering, "No, no, no, this is not real, this is just exhaustion." or a trick of the light, and I forced myself to keep walking, but my steps grew clumsy and uneven as though the trail wanted me off balance. The smoke smell thickened. With it came something worse, a stench of rot so sharp it burned the inside of my nose. I gagged into my sleeve, my knees threatening to buckle, but I pressed on each step heavier. Then alas, somewhere behind me came the unmistakable snap of a twig, followed by another, then another, too steady to be random, to measure, to be an animal. I spun around, my flashlight shaking in my hand, and for half breath I caught at a figure at the edge of the beam, tall, thin, motionless. Its head tilted far too much to one side, as if its neck had been broken, its face hidden in the dark. Yet I felt its eyes piercing straight through the light into me. I blinked. It was gone, like it had melted back into the bark, leaving only silence and my own ragged breath. Wanted to scream, I wanted to run, but the trail was the only direction left, and my legs kept moving almost like they were no longer mine. My boots dragging in rhythm with something heavier that echoed beneath the soil. The ground hung like a heartbeat, slow, steady, pounding in time with the whispers, which grew louder now, overlapping until I could pick out words, though I wished I had not, because the voices were calling my name over and over, each syllable stretched low, drawn out like a chant. He stumbled into a small clearing where the trees pulled back just enough to reveal a stone marker half buried in moss. The letters carved into it were weathered but still sharp: Ashwood Family Cemetery, 1854. And the earth around it looked restless, as though the graves beneath had been disturbed by something clawing upward. I crouched against a tree, my body trembling, telling myself this was just old history, just another forgotten pioneer burial ground, nothing to fear. But my light caught fresh claw marks raked deep into the stone, a smear of what looked like blood still wet. Then the sound came low and guttural from beneath my feet, a growl that rolled through the dirt so strong I felt it in my chest. I scrambled backward, my hands scraping bark, my flashlight swinging wild, and in that spinning beam I saw them, not one figure, not two, but dozens, pale shapes standing between graves, their mouths moving in unison, their voices rising into that same chant. My name repeated over and over, the sound thick, heavy, pounding through my scummy legs gave out. I dropped hard to the dirt, the beam flicking up toward their faces, and in that instant I saw them clearly, skin torn, eyes hollow, yet burning with light, mouths stretched open wider than human jaws should go, each one mouthing my name with a hunger that rattled me down to the bone. And though terror locked my body still, some instinct screamed at me to crawl, to move, to do anything but sit in their gaze. When I tried to rise, the ground itself heaved beneath me, as though the forest floor wanted me to sink into it, wanted to swallow me whole. The dirt buckled beneath me like the skin of something alive, and I dug my fingers into the ground, trying to push myself up, but the soil was soft, slick, almost breathing. My knees sank, as though the earth had been hollowed and filled with water. When I looked down, I saw no puddle, only black dirt that shimmered faintly in the beam of my light like ash caught in a draft. My pulse hammered against my ribs, and the voices surrounding me rose louder until they drowned out every thought, each syllable pulling my name like a thread unraveling. My sanity staggered to my feet and forced my legs into motion, slipping on the uneven ground and stumbling between tilted gravestones. stones, their names half swallowed by moss and dirt. But as I passed each one, I noticed something that stopped me cold. The carvings had changed, the names had shifted from Ashwood family to names I recognized, names of people I had known back home in Missouri, classmates, old neighbors, even my uncle who had died years ago, each stone carrying a date that matched the exact day they had passed. As I shined my light shakily across the stones, the letters shifted again, until I saw my own name carved clean into one marker, the date fresh marked with. To die, a sound escaped me, half scream, half gasp, and the chanting figures seemed to swell with it. Their mouths stretching wider, their voices breaking into a shrill rising tone that cracked the air. Like static, I turned on instinct, running toward the far edge of the clearing, but the trail no longer looked like a trail. It was narrower, darker, winding down even deeper into the hollow. I had no choice but to take it, because staying meant being consumed by whatever was gathering at the cemetery. Boots pounded the dirt, kicking up a haze that glittered like cinders in my light. The trees on either side warped and twisted like they had been melted, reshaped, their bark stretching into faces silent and screaming, frozen in agony. I tried to keep my eyes forward, but each glance to the side showed another face, another expression carved by nature, yet far too precise to be accidental. The smell of smoke returned, heavier, choking, filling my throat until I coughed raw, and when I blinked back tears, I realized it was not smoke alone, it was fire, faint licks of flame glowing from cracks in the dirt. Like the ground itself burned from within, the voices followed me even louder now, surrounding me. Though the figures had not moved from the cemetery, it was as if the entire hollow had taken their chorus into its lungs. Now breathed it back, and meth slope grew steeper, my legs shaking as I scrambled downward, sliding against loose dirt, my flashlight beam jolting wildly until it landed on something ahead. An old wooden cabin half hidden behind thickets, its roof sagging, its windows black like hollow eyes, staring me down. The trail curved directly toward it, as if it had been built as the destination, and though my instincts screamed to avoid it, my feet carried me closer, pulled by something I could not resist. The cabin door hung ajar, swaying gently, though no wind stirred, and as I neared, I saw scratches deep gouged, torn into the wood around the frame, some angled downward like fingernails, some upward like claws. I stopped short, my breath rattling my chest, a light shaking across the threshold, and for a moment I could swear I saw movement inside, a shadow darting past the black window like something pacing, waiting for me. Told myself, do not go in, do not, you will not walk back out if you cross that door. But the trail behind me seemed to melt into darkness, closing like a throat. The whispers pressing harder, louder, almost unbearable, the ground beneath my boots humming with each chant of my name, and before I knew it, I was stepping forward, the cabin pulling me in like a magnet. Inside, the air was damp, heavy, but the stench of rot wood swollen with age and mold, the floorboards groaned under my weight, each creak echoing too long, too loud. I shined my light across the room, and my stomach twisted. The walls were lined with carvings, names etched into the wood. Hundreds, maybe thousands, overlapping one another, the same names I had seen on the gravestones. At the center, carved deeper than the rest, was mine, my name cut into the timber. With such force the grooves were stained dark, as though filled with dried blood. He backed away, my shoulder hit something soft, and when I turned, the beam caught. A figure standing behind me, its face inches from mine, pale, sagging, its eyes hollow, yet burning with faint fire, its mouth moving silently, but the sound of my name poured from it. Without the lips matching, I stumbled back, my light dropping to the floor, the beam catching not one figure, but a dozen crammed into the corners of the cabin. Their heads bent at wrong angles, their limbs too long to stiff, each one twitching like marionettes. Pulled by unseen strange chorus of my name became deafening, filling the cabin until the walls shook, dust pouring from the ceiling, the floor heaving beneath me like a lung about to burst, and the figures lurched forward in jagged motions, their mouths opening wider and wider until I thought their jaws would rip free of their skulls. He bolted for the door, my hand scraping the frame. As I threw myself outside, stumbling into the dirt, my flashlight still inside, flickering against the walls of names, the figures spilling toward it, their movements jerking faster, more violent. But as I looked back, I saw the light die snuffed out as though swallowed, and the cabin collapsed in on itself with a sound like wood and bone breaking, leaving only silence and smoke rising faint from the ruins. He gasped. In the darkness, no light left, no path visible, only the glow of faint embers in the cracks of the ground around me, pulsing like veins, and I knew that I had not escaped anything. The hollow had only shifted, drawing me further down into its heart. The glow spilling from the arch wrapped around me, colder than ice, yet burning like frostbite. And every instinct screamed not to step closer. But the pull was stronger than instinct, stronger than fear. Like invisible hands pushing my back and dragging me forward, the carvings along the stone twisted and the light shifting their shapes. With every flicker, spirals becoming eyes, eyes becoming mouths, mouths stretching wide and swallowing themselves again. I raised my flashlight to the markings, and they beamed and warped as if the stone itself consumed light, refusing to let it leave, with whispers in my ears sharpened, no longer a chant of my name, but a language I did not recognize, words older than anything I had ever heard, harsh jagged syllables that rattled through my bones, and yet somehow I understood the meaning, not through thought, but through feeling. The words were a call, an invitation, a demand. Step through step and step deeper. Fought against the pull, my heels digging into the dirt, body shaking as if the hollow itself tugged my veins like strings. I shouted out, "Stop, leave me alone, I do not belong here," but the sound of my voice cracked, useless. The words smothered by the chant that grew louder than thunder. The ground shook, trees groaning like bones snapping, and from the corners of the clearing figures began to appear, pale and thin like shadows stretched into flesh, their movements jerky, unnatural. Their mouths all open in silent screams, yet the voices still poured out louder and louder, filling every corner of the clearing. I backed against the tree line, my flashlight darting over them, but each time the beam hit their faces, it slid away like oil, refusing to reveal their full form. Their heads twitched, snapping from side to side in unnatural angles, their arms clawed toward the arches of worshipping or begging. I realized with a sick twist in my gut that they were not coming for me, they were waiting for me to go through the arch like I was the key to something trapped behind it. The ground rumbled, harder soil cracking open, thin streams of that faint blue light rising like mist from the earth, roots tearing free from the ground, writhing like snakes around my boots, I kicked free, scrambling backward, but no matter where I turned, the clearing funneled me toward the arch. The forest folding its limbs inward, closing off every path until the only opening left was that searing glow. I told myself I would not go, I would fight this, I would turn and claw my way through the woods, even if it ripped me apart. But then the light pulsed brighter like a heartbeat, and I felt it inside my skull, pounding behind my eyes like something was cracking me open from the inside, my vision blurred. My muscles locked and my legs carried me forward without permission, my hands clawing at the dirt, trying to anchor myself, but still my body moved closer, dragged step by step, until the arch loomed over me, taller than I had realized, its stones glistening as though bleeding from inside. At the moment my foot crossed the threshold, the world fell silent. The whispers cut off, the ground stopped trembling, the trees froze, and for one impossible moment, everything was still, and then the glow swallowed me. Wholly expected fire or ice or darkness, but instead I felt nothing, nowhere, no ground, no sky, just weightless silence stretching in every direction. My flashlight flickered in my hand, then died, leaving me blind, yet the glow still surrounded me. Without source, without shadow, I turned in circles, my breath ragged, but no matter where I looked, there was no forest, no clearing, only endless pale light pulsing faintly like a lung, inhaling and exhaling around me. Then the voices returned, not whispers, now but a chorus loud enough to tear at my eardrums, words crashing together like waves in a storm. I dropped to my knees, clutching my head, screaming for it to stop, but the sound only grew harsher, sharper, until the light itself split open before me, tearing like fabric, and through that rip I saw it, something vast, something I cannot describe without shaking even now, a shape so large it made the trees, the hollow, the world itself feel like toys, its body writhing in coils that had no end, its face shifting between 1,000 visages, none human, all wrong, its eyes, if they were eyes, burned blacker than void, yet brighter than suns, and they locked on me with hunger. So deep it hollowed me out, he tried to crawl back away from the tear, but the ground beneath me was gone. I was floating now, weightless, pulled toward the wound in the light, as though gravity itself had shifted, and all that existed was that thing waiting beyond the veil. I clawed at nothing, my fingers scraping air, my throat raw from screaming, though no sound left my lips. The chorus of voices swelled and swelled, until it felt like my skull would burst, and just as the creature leaned closer, its mouth splitting into a grin that stretched too wide, the light snapped shut and I slammed back into dirt. So hard the wind tore from my chest, he lay there gasping, my flashlight dead, my body aching, the glow gone, the arch gone, nothing left but trees pressing close, the forest silent yet alive with a weight heavier than ever before, and though I could not see them, I knew the figures were still there, watching, breathing, waiting. I could not tell how long I lay on the dirt, gasping, my ribs aching, my palms bleeding from clawing at nothing, the forest around me holding its silence like a predator. Crouched in tall grass, I pushed myself upright, every bone in my body shaking. When I looked around the clearing, the arch was gone, no stone, no glow, no trace it had ever existed, yet the air was still thick, with its weight like an echo, too heavy to fade. I fumbled with my backpack, ripping it open for a flare, my fingers shaking so badly I almost dropped it, but when I struck it alive, the red fire hissed, and painted the trees in blood-light shadows leaping like claws across the bark. The figures that had surrounded the arch were gone, but in their place were marks, carved deep into the earth, spiral symbols gouged, dug so violently. The dirt looked torn apart by hands, and the flare smoke drifted low, curling into those grooves, as if the ground itself exhaled. The sound returned, soft at first, from beneath the soil, like a drumbeat, slow to deep for human ears, yet strong enough to rattle my chest. I crouched, pressing a hand against the ground, and felt it pulsing, steady, constant, alive. Whispered under my breath, "What are you? What are you?" But the words cracked, and the rhythm answered by growing louder, stronger, until the dirt quivered. And then cracks split open between my boots. The stench of rot poured out thick, suffocating, carrying with it a low moan that shook the trees, a sound like something buried too long, dragging itself awake. I stumbled backward, the flare hissing in my grip, its smoke curling upward in frantic spirals, and as I raised it high, I saw the forest around me shift, trees bending outward, roots pulling from the ground as though making space for whatever was stirring beneath. Moans stretched into something worse, a voice, not words, yet filled with intent, raw hunger, ancient and bottomless. It rose from the soil itself, vibrating the air until leaves shook from branches. Like rain, the symbols carved in the earth glowed faint red, answering the flare. I realized the marks were not carved at random, they were veins, and the hollow itself was a body breathing, shuddering, waiting to open. He turned to run, forcing my legs to move, but every step sank deeper into the ground, like the soil had turned to ash. Pulling at my boots, I yanked one free, then the other, stumbling forward, until the flare light caught movement ahead, and my blood froze because there was a shape crawling from the dirt. A hand first, then stretched bones covered in skin like wax, then a shoulder, then a face, twisted eyelets, its mouth gaping wide enough to split the head in half. And behind it, more hands, more faces, rising, clawing free. He hurled the flare at them, the red light bursting across their forms, and they shrieked not with sound, but with silence, a pressure wave so sharp it cut into my ears, leaving me dizzy. I bolted through the gap between them, the trail ahead opening only in fragments lit by fading sparks of the flare and the faint glow of embers, still pulsing in cracks of the earth. Branches ripped at my arms, tearing skin. My lungs heaved, each breath choking on the rot and smoke behind me. The ground split wider, the drum shaking into a roar, like something enormous was pushing up from below. And though I did not dare look back, I could feel its size, its mass rising, filling the hollow, pressing the air tighter with every second. The trail spat me into another, clearing smaller, darker, and at its center stood a single tree taller than all the rest, its trunk swollen wide, its bark blackened like char and nailed into its side were objects, dozens, maybe hundreds, rusted knives, broken tools, twisted metal, each piece hammered into the wood like offerings, and from those wounds the tree bled thick sap, black and glistening, dripping down in ropes that hissed when they touched the ground. Roar beneath the soil quieted as I stepped into the clearing, replaced by whispers again, softer now, circling me from the branches of that massive tree. I lifted my dying flashlight and saw faces carved into the trunk, each one twisted in agony, eyes wide, mouths stretched, silent but moving, and some I recognized from babes, from the cabin, from the jacket I had found. The faces all shifting, faint, as though alive within the bark, their eyes rolling, following me as I moved. He whispered to no one, "Why are you showing me this?" And the tree groaned low, a sound like wood snapping under ice, the sap dripping faster, pulling at its base, the ground trembling. I understood with sudden clarity that the hollow was not just forest, not just graves, not just a trailhead. It was a mouth, and everything I had seen, the arch, the carvings, the figures, were its teeth and tongue, and what stirred beneath was the throat preparing to swallow. The tree loomed before me, taller than any pine. Around its bark split and blistered like burned flesh, the sap dripping thick black ropes that hissed when they touched the dirt, each drop bubbling and sinking into the soil as though feeding something. Beneath the roots I tried to keep my distance, but the ground itself nudged me closer. Every step sliding like the dirt wanted me pressed against that trunk. The faces carved into it shifted with each flicker of my weak beam, their mouths opening wider, their eyes rolling in slow agony, and I could swear I heard them breathy on face drew my gaze. Would not let go. A young man, eyes sunk deep, mouth trembling like he was whispering. I stepped closer against every instinct, pressing my ear near the bark, and the words came faint, broken but clear. Let it out, his voice rasped dry. And then the bark split wider beneath his mouth, tearing with a wet crack, the wood opening like flesh to reveal lips pale and moving, the whisper stronger now, repeating, let it out, he stumbled back, my heel catching on a root, the flashlight dropping from my grip, spinning its beam across the clearing, and for a moment I saw every face carved and the trunk moving together, their mouths chanting in rhythm the same phrase, their voices low groaning, not human. The sound rattled the ground, making my teeth chatter. I scrambled for the light, but the sap had reached it, sizzling against the metal, burning the plastic lens until it flickered, dead, leaving me in blackness. Chant grew louder, vibrating in my chest, and the roots shifted, pulling free from the ground, writhing like serpents, snapping toward me. Dug low, rolling across the dirt, my fingers finding a rock which I hurled blindly at the trunk. The impact cracked loud, and the chanting stopped. The silence that followed was heavier than sound, and in that pause I realized the tree was breathing slow, deep breaths that pulled the air from my lungs and forced it back. And like I was caught in its rhythm, then the ground opened beneath it wide, splitting like a wound, glowing red from within, heat rushing out thick with the stink of ash and blood, something enormous shifting below. I crawled backward away from the fissure, but the dirt crumbled, pulling me closer, and I felt that heat clawed my skin, burning. Though no flame touched me, the faces in the bark screamed now, mouths open wider than bone, should allow the sound tearing at the clearing, until I thought the world itself was splitting from the wound beneath the roots. Something rose, not a hand, not a face, but an eye larger than the tree itself, round and black, with a ring of red fire burning around its edge. It blinked once, heavy, slow, and the earth shook in response. The sight of it froze me, my breath caught my chest hollow, as though that I was pulling the air from me. The pupil dilated wider, until all I saw was void, and within it faint shapes moved, writhing bodies twisting, in chains stretching out toward me, with arms too long and mouths too wide. I tore my gaze away, screaming, raw, my throat tearing as I forced my legs to move. I staggered through the clearing, branches clawing my face, sap splattering, my arms burning like acid, the whispers behind me rising again, chanting my name this time, not let it out. But my name stretched long, broken into syllables that cracked like thunder, the sound chasing me, until every step felt like I was running on the edge of a cliff about to give way. The trail ahead bent downward again, deeper into the hollow. The trees leaning in tighter, their branches tangled like barbed wire. I wanted to stop, wanted to find a way back up, but every path behind me was gone, swallowed by shadow. The only way forward was down, and I knew with sick certainty that the trail was not leading me out, it was leading me closer to the thing that had opened its eye. And that thing was awake now. The trail kept sloping down and the air grew thicker. With every step like breathing through damp wool, the smell of rot stronger than anything I had known back home in the Midwest. Swamps mixed with iron and smoke. I clutched the edges of trees as I went, but each trunk I touched pulsed faintly under my hand, like veins were running beneath the bark. When I pulled back, my palm was slick with that same black sap. It burned in tiny pinpricks, crawling under my skin like insects. I rubbed it against my jeans, desperate to scrape it away, but the sting only dug deeper. The sound of water grew ahead, a rushing roar, not of a river, but something heavier, thicker. When I broke through a gap in the trees, the trail ended at a wide sinkhole, and inside was a pool, but the liquid swirling below was no water. It was black tar bubbling and churning as if alive, and hanging above it, strung from the branches of twisted trees. Dozens of figures, their bodies dangling upside down, their limbs limp, their mouths moving in silent words, their eyes glowing faint red like embers in the dark. You stood frozen, my breath stuck in my chest, until one of the bodies jerked violently, swinging like a broken puppet, its head twisted toward me. With a snap, the mouth stretched wider than the skull should allow, and the voice that came was layered with too many tones, all speaking as one. You are late. The sound made the pool below surge, rising like it wanted to climb the sides to reach me. The figures above swayed harder, their mouths chanting that same phrase over and over. You are late. Your latte backed away, but the dirt at the edge crumbled, dragging me closer, my boots sliding into the loose soil, and I felt the heat from that black tar lick against my skin, the smell filling my lungs until I gagged and nearly dropped to my knees. I grabbed at a root to hold myself steady, but the root twitched like it was alive and coiled around my wrist, pulling tighter, trying to drag me in. I yanked hard, pain shooting up my arm, the skin tearing, but I managed to rip free, leaving streaks of blood on the bark. The pool below began to shape itself, the bubbling forming outlines of hands clawing upward, stretching higher each moment, and the voices above shifted their chant. No longer you are late, but join us, join us. The words vibrating inside my skull until my thoughts felt not my own. I pressed my palms over my ears, but the sound was not outside, it was inside, drilling down deeper. I realized the faces above were familiar faces from the missing posters I had seen at the ranger station, eyes dim, but burning with something unnatural. Only of them spoke, separate from the others. A girl, her eyes wet with fire, whispering help. Me, the voice was broken, human, almost tender, and I took a step forward. Before I realized, my boots were already sinking into the soil. The ground was no longer solid. It pulsed like muscle, and it was drawing me toward the pool, the black surface rising. To meet me, I screamed, pushing back with everything I had, tearing at the dirt and finally dragging myself up onto harder ground, my chest heaving, my arms trembling. From the F-Worth pool calmed slightly, but the voices never stopped, they just grew. Softer, fading into the background like they were waiting, watching. I staggered back from the edge and turned down another narrow path that led deeper through the woods, each step heavier than the last, and in that moment I knew I was not escaping. I was being led, like the trail itself was a vein pulsing into the heart of something larger, something that was waiting for me. The trail narrowed until I had to press sideways between trunks of trees, bent inward, their bark splitting with faint groans like they were alive, and suffering the smell of iron and wet ash stuck in my throat, and I could taste metal with each breath. The sound of that black tar pit was gone behind me, but something else replaced it, faint thuds that echoed through the soil below my boots. Like a heartbeat under the earth, steady, slow, waiting, she finally pushed through into a clearing. What I saw froze me worse than the pit. There was a circle of stones carved into rough shapes. Standing taller than me, their surfaces etched with symbols I could not read. And inside the circle lay bones stacked carefully into towers, rib cages, balanced on skull spines woven together like ladders reaching upward toward the night sky. At the center of it all was a hollow in the ground, a wide opening that breathed fog. With every exhale, the mist rolled across the grass, curling around. My boots like fingers pulling me closer. I crouched near the edge of the hole, staring down. But there was no bottom, no soil, no stone, only a void glowing faint red. As though fire was far beneath it, I leaned in further, and the air rushed upward hot against my face, carrying whispers not from one voice, but thousands layered over each other. Like a storm, all pleading, all commanding, all crying in pain, raged the words impossible to separate until one came clear spoken with the clarity of someone standing directly beside me. Stepped down, my knees buckled against my will. I caught myself on the stones at the edge, the carvings cutting into my palms. The blood smeared across the runes made them pulse faintly with light, and I felt something shift under me, like the ground acknowledged me, like it knew my name. The heartbeat I had heard under the soil now thundered louder, shaking dust from the towers of bones. And they began to topple, falling around me, but not randomly, no, each pile collapsed in order, one after another, like a countdown to 9, 8, the crashes pounded in rhythm. My racing heart, 7, 6, 5, I scrambled backward, but the circle closed tighter. The stones leaning toward me as if pushed by invisible hands for 3. To the last tower fell with a shattering crack, and the hollow at the center roared open. Under a surge of heat rushing upward so strong it knocked me off my feet, I landed on my back, staring into the red glow, and from it something began to resonate. A figure, not a body, but a shape made of shadow and flame twisting into arms, then breaking apart into tendrils, its face flickering between thousands of human features. All screaming silently, all reaching toward me. The air grew heavy, pressing down on my chest, and I couldn't breathe, my body refusing to move. As if the things will pin me in place, the whispers in my head align now, speaking in one unified tone. Welcome home. I felt the dirt beneath me pulse again, and before I knew it, the sliding toward the hollow, dragged by invisible force, my fingers clawed at the soil, but it melted like wet clay, offering nothing to hold onto. I screamed until my throat tore, but but the sound vanished, swallowed by the whispers around me, and as I reached the edge, the heat burned my skin, my vision blurred, and I knew there was no going back. No waking up, no trail to climb out of, only the fall waiting bellow on. Then the ground gave way, and I dropped into the hollow core. The fab never ended. I fell with my arms flailing, and the air around me burned hot, yet smelled like frozen stone. The red glow stretched into infinity, the walls around me shifting like veins pulsing with dark light, faces pressed against the surface of the stone, screaming silently, their mouths wide, their eyes following me downward. Each time I blinked, new faces appeared, old and young, men and women, their expressions twisted into terror and grief, as if they were all trapped in the rock, watching me descend into their prison. At some point my body stopped falling, though there was no ground. I simply hung weightless, suspended in a void of red and black smoke swirled around me, moving with intent, wrapping around my arms and chest until I felt bound in place. I tried to shout, but the smoke filled my throat, silencing me, and all around me I heard those voices layered again, yet this time clearer, each one a confession, each one a death scream. I heard a man begging for forgiveness. I heard a child crying for her mother. I heard the last gasps of someone drowning. Every single one was drawn into me like their suffering was a current. I could not resist. Smoke cleared just enough for me to see something ahead, a structure rising out of the void, impossible in size. It was a tower made of bone rib cages, woven into pillar skulls, mortared together with black turrets top hidden in the swirling red mist. From its windows dim lights flickered faint orange like lanterns in the night. The tower hummed as though alive, and with each hum I felt my heart beat in rhythm against my chest, like the tower itself was sensing with meth, and a stairway of vertebrae extended outward from the tower, curling toward me step by step, like it wanted me to climb. Smoke wrapped tighter around my chest. I felt my legs move against my wall, my boots pressing onto the bone stairs, each one creaking and groaning under my weight. The voices fell silent, leaving only the hollow sound. My breath as I ascended higher, the tower vibrating through the soles of my feet. Halfway up, I saw windows open in the tower walls, shadows moving behind them, figures watching me, shapes with hollow eyes and twisted arms, their hands scraping the edges of the windows, leaving trails of sparks as they drag bone against bone. Some leaned forward, their jaws unhinged as if ready to devour me. The stairway trembled, but did not collapse, pulling me closer step after step until I reached a platform carved into the side of the tower. Platform was lit by torches made of femurs, their flames cold blue, and the air stank of rot and copper. Standing at the center was a figure taller than any man, cloaked in tattered fabric that seemed to bleed, as its face covered by a mask of stitched skin, the mouth torn open to wide, the eyes sewn shut with rusted wire. The figure raised its hand, and the smoke binding me snapped away, though my body remained frozen, not by force but by the sheer weight. Its presence, its voice rang in my skull, not spoken aloud but vibrating through my bones. You are chosen not because of worth, not because of fate, but because you step willingly. You opened the gate with blood, and now the gate will open for you. I tried to speak, to beg, or to curse, but my tongue was stone. The figure tilted its head, and from behind the stitched mask, a swarm of flies poured out, filling the air around down my face, crawling against my lips and into my ears before vanishing into the smoke again. Figure lowered its hand and the platform shook, the tower itself groaning as though it was alive and waking. The red mist below surged upward, engulfing me. The voices returned, unified in their chant, descend, descend, descend. And the platform split open beneath me, revealing a spiral staircase. Winding down into the heart of the tower, the figure pointed downward, and though every part of me screamed not to go, my legs began to move, stepping into the spiral, drawn deeper into the abyss with no way back. As I descended, the air grew thicker, heavier each breath, tearing at my lungs. The walls of the staircase dripped with blood that glowed faintly in the dark, my reflection appearing in it but not truly mine. My face, warped, twisted into shapes I didn't recognize each time I looked. It showed me another death, another fate that wasn't mine, yet felt inevitable. At the bottom of the spiral, I found a vast chamber carved into the heart of the tower, the ceiling lost in blackness, the floor covered in water ankle deep and reeking of decay. Floating on its surface were fragments of bone and flesh, and in the center rose a pedestal made of ribs curled upward, like the hands of a giant holding a black stone, the size of a human heart. The stone pulsed with light, each throb matching my heartbeat. I realized with dread that it was Alive, a step closer, unable to resist, and the voices whispered again, this time softer, almost soothing, take it, it is yours, it has always been yours. And as I reached out, my hand shook uncontrollably, but the stone leaned toward me like it wanted the contact. The moment my fingers brushed it, the chamber roared, the water churned, and the tower itself screamed like a living creature in agony. The stone burned cold in my hand, yet it pulsed like a heart, each throb sending waves of fire through my veins. I tried to let go, but my fingers would not obey. My arm locked stiff, as though the stone itself had grafted into my flesh. The chamber spun, the water splashing up around my legs, but it was no longer water, it was blood thick and hot, crawling upward against gravity, pulling at me like hands. Rising from the floor, the tower moaned, its walls splitting open to reveal faces pressed into the stone, mouths wide in endless screams, their tongues writhing, their eyes bloodshot, rolling wild, each face one of the hikers that had vanished from the trailhead over the years. I recognized them from missing posters, their hollow eyes now fixed on me, all of them chanting the same words over and over, return, return, return. Black stone's light brightened until the entire chamber glowed red. My vision cracked into fragments, and behind me the cloaked figure appeared again, its mask dripping, now as if it had fused with rotten skin, its sewn eyes tearing open, revealing nothing but hollow sockets filled with swirling red mist. The figure raised both hands, and the water of blood surged upward, swallowing the faces, the pedestal, the chamber, until I was floating weightless, my body held in suspension. But then a storm of liquid voices. The voices overlapped, but one grew stronger than the rest, a deep sound rolling like thunder inside my chest. You are the vessel, the gate must drink the world, but must be torn open through flesh, through your blood, through your fear. I felt the black stone sink into my chest, fusing with me, ribs cracking. As it buried itself into my heart, I screamed, but the sound died in the flood, the blood rushing into my throat, choking me until silence consumed everything. When I opened my eyes, I was lying on the trailhead, my clothes soaked in mud, the night sky above broken. The streaks of red like veins tearing across the stars, the forest no longer silent. Instead alive with groans, whispers the trees bending toward me, their bark cracking open to reveal pale faces stretched inside their wood, their mouths muttering my name over and over. The trailhead sign was gone, replaced by a pillar of bone rising from the dirt, carved with symbols that writhed like worms shifting. As I looked at them, he tried to stand, but the ground pulsed beneath my feet, the soil breathing like lungs, every step squelching like flesh, and in the distance where the trail should have led deeper into the forest, I saw lights, hundreds of lanterns bobbing, moving toward me. And beneath each light was a figure, twisted shapes, wearing the skins of hikers, faces stretched to thin bodies bent backward, their arms dragging on the ground. They walked in unison, their mouths hanging open wide, but no sound escaping. The closer they came, the more I felt it, the black stone inside my chest, beating harder, feeding them, guiding them, and then I understood the tower had not been a prison. It was a root, and I was now its seed planted into the trailhead. The cursed earth made me part of it. The stone tethered me to the voices, to the hunger, to the endless need to pull others, and I stumbled backward, but the forest closed behind me, the trees bending into arches of bone, sealing my path, every exit gone, every breath stolen into the rhythm of the gate opening wider. With every throb of my cursed heart, the first figure stepped into the glow of the red-streaked sky. Its skin melted to its skull, yet it smiled, its teeth black with rot, and it reached for me not to drag me down, but to bow before me, whispering, "Welcome, herald of the hollow." The rest followed, kneeling in the mud, their whispers rising into a chant, the sound rattling the earth until the trailhead itself split open beneath my feet, revealing the glow of the tower deep below, waiting for me to lead them back. You realize then that no one would ever escape this trail. Every hiker, every wanderer, every lost soul would be drawn here, their blood feeding the hollow, their bodies becoming part of the faces in the stone. I was the one who had led it, and my voice joined theirs, unwilling, my throat tearing. As I screamed the chant, "Return, return, return," and the forest answered with 1,000 voices rising into the night sky. Tears complete, the gate opened forever. The last thing I remember before the darkness took me was the sign rising again from the dirt, its letters glowing white against the bone. "Welcome to Blackthorn